everyone. Welcome to the Safe House, brought to you by the SafeHouse Initiative. I'm Jeff Edwards, co-chair of the SafeHouse Initiative, and your host for today's podcast. Today's episode, we have the privilege of peering through the lens of national security as it pertains to cybersecurity and operational resilience. Our guest today is with the Department of Homeland Security as the Assistant Secretary of Cyber, Infrastructure, Risk, and Resilience. Iranga Kahangama, it's a pleasure to have you and an honor actually to have you join us on the Safe House. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to this conversation today.
I am too. Iranga, I tell you, it's I know a bit about your background, but you've had quite a journey to what you're doing today. You've done a lot in a very short time. Could you share and kind of acquaint yourself with our audience so they get a better understanding of your background, what you're doing currently, and then we'll go from there?
Sure. Yeah. Happy to talk a little bit about that. It's a very humbling experience being in public service now for about a decade, but it's been a good journey for me. As you mentioned, currently I'm at DHS as the Assistant Secretary for Cyber Infrastructure, Risk, and Resilience, but it's been a bit of a journey to get here, all under the guise of public service, which has driven a lot of my work. I'll start, my career in the federal service began with the FBI. I joined the FBI quickly out of grad school as a policy analyst, working on cybersecurity, technology, and internet governance matters, helping the Bureau understand its role in a policy world, right? It's primarily an operational agency, and I got to see a lot of operational work. But the Bureau had a gap in terms of engaging on policy. And so we were able to establish a good cyber and tech policy lens for the FBI. About 7 years into my time there, opportunity opened up to represent and be the detailee from the FBI to the National Security Council's cyber division at the White House. So I took that, and that was a fascinating opportunity. I joined the National Security Council as the Director for Cyber Incident Response, so coordinating the federal response to major cyber incidents. That was supposed to be a one-year gig. It ended up turning into a three-year gig, but three of the best years of my federal experience for sure. And that's where I got really into seeing a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today, right? Ranging from SolarWinds hack from Russia, a series of ransomware incidents, as well as getting to work on policy, authoring the President Biden's cybersecurity executive order and things like that. So that was a very interesting 3 years. And then from there, the opportunity opened up to jump over and be a leader at the Department of Homeland Security, where, I thought one of the gaps that I'd seen that I hadn't had was looking at cybersecurity from the defensive side, right? Between the FBI and NSC, I had looked at cyber from the attack side, from the victim side, from the incident side. But now I get a chance to work on the proactive defense, getting ahead of incidents, deterring them from happening to begin with. And so that's a lot of the work on the policy side that I do here at the department. So a little bit about me and how I got here.
Well, it's you get a 360 view now, basically, offense and defense.
Yeah.
So I didn't really stop to think that when you were at the White House, that was during the COVID years.
Yeah, there was a little bit of that made it quite challenging as well, for sure.
Well, you've been a busy man. So at your time at the White House, I think there was a term when we first talked, the Summer of Ransomware. Did you want to talk a little bit about that and all the things, because you had a lot of experiences during that. A lot was going on during that summer.
Yeah, no, most definitely. It's actually a bit of a term of endearment between me and my colleagues who have some trauma from all of the ransomware that occurred that summer. Obviously, nowhere near the amount of trauma that these victims had to experience. But,
sure.
At the same time, it was this eye-opening experience for us as national security policymakers to really rethink how we thought about ransomware, right? I think before that, ransomware was obviously an epidemic, but largely treated as a law enforcement criminal matter, something that was happening in pockets of the country, not really taking this national level perspective, this broad national security concern and national economic detriment occurring. So, this term you mentioned, the Summer of Ransomware, really refers to a 3-month period for the summer of 2021.
Hmm.
To set the atmosphere a little, right, you have to think about the context. This is the first 6 months of the Biden administration. They are coming out of, a really devastating solar winds attack by a nation state
Yeah.
adversary. We had previously also had an attack by the PRC on Microsoft servers. And so there's a lot of elevated tension in the atmosphere around cybersecurity issues.
Yeah.
And now, all of a sudden, you see a series of incidents happening with severe public and economic stress. Most notably was in May of 2021 when we had the ransomware incident on Colonial Pipeline, right?
Right.
You may
Yeah.
have
Yeah. I forgot about
remember,
that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
this is the whole, we see people filling up trash cans and trash bags with gasoline on the East Coast because there's a panic. And if you're sitting in the White House, politically, not the greatest look for the country. And then from a security perspective, also panic. So as you can imagine, this spun up a significant amount of churn in the White House. We were convening meetings, really trying to work with the company, working with Congress and other stakeholders in the administration to try and get it down. I think we got it to a decent place after about a week. And so, to make a long story shorter, we had a lot of tension with that.
Yeah.
Within the next month, at the end of May, early June, you see another ransomware attack on a company called JBS Foods.
Yeah. I remember that one. Yeah.
Yeah, not your household name, but definitely your household provider, specifically of meat products,
Yeah. They had
beef.
the big processing plants out in the Midwest or down south. They had a lot of plants all around the country, right?
Yeah, 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 definitely all over the country, global company, really. You got to realize the reality again, where in the summer, people are grilling, right? We're heading
Yeah.
into July 4th weekend, and one of the nation's biggest beef producers is experiencing a ransomware incident and not able to deliver the beef products that they need. So, again, a significant strain on the White House. And so, same thing, we jumped into action, coordinated the federal response, worked with the company, tried to help restore, find alternatives, but working it from a cyber angle, from an economics angle, and so forth. So again, not ideal, eventually contained, but still sitting on the minds of senior policymakers.
So you basically had the attack on our way to get around through the pipeline, and then you had the attack on our food at a time of grilling during the
Yeah,
summer.
no, exactly right. It was kind of
Very
like what's left at
personal.
that point, just
Yeah.
water. Yeah, these are really, really eye-opening issues for the country, for the economy, really.
Yeah.
And so then the
Wow.
summer of ransomware was kind of capped off too with the last incident, not the last, there's a lot of incidents, but there was another one on a kind of lesser known but pretty prominent software IT provider, Kaseya, right? And Kaseya
Yeah.
software
Uh-huh.
is deeply embedded in a lot of different other IT services and products. And so, again, same playbook. You see a lot of the same ransomware actors jumping in, putting down systems that drive our economy, that drive commerce and point of sales, purchasing, and other IT services going down. And so you have this panic again with debilitating impacts. And so we see
Yeah.
all this happen from literally May to the end of July of 2021, and thus was the summer of ransomware that really created a sense of urgency in the White House to look at this from a really bigger picture lens, national security lens. How do
Yeah.
we use all levers of US national power to try and mitigate this issue?
So, quick question for you. So, what policies and or actions were driven out of these three events, and many others, but these three big ones? Can you kind of look at and say, okay, the government started to work more closely with the business sector. They beefed up CISA. The ONCD became a lot more of a facilitator between different groups. So, what are the things that happened as a result of the summer of ransomware?
That's a great question. I think the most direct result was that we had a cybersecurity executive order signed by President Biden.
Yeah.
in May
Right.
of 2021. And, we had been working on that for months. There were elements that cleaned up federal systems and improved cybersecurity where we had the authority to do so. But we beefed that one up, and then that got signed shortly after Colonial, I believe.
Yeah.
So direct result of that is a national, when you talk about a national effort, a directive from the president
Yeah.
instructing his team and the government to take all steps necessary to lock down systems, to provide assistance. One of the best things that came out of the cybersecurity EO was the creation of this body that actually lives within my office at DHS now, was something called the Cyber Safety Review Board.
Huh. Okay.
And if your audience isn't familiar, it's a public-private partnership where we created a board at DHS. It's comprised of a half a dozen cybersecurity leaders in the government from FBI, NSA, DHS, and others.
Yeah.
And then the other half of the board are private sector cyber leaders.
Okay.
And so these are executives or technical experts from your major tech companies, from ISPs, internet service providers, from critical infrastructure. And they get together, they sit and examine cyber incidents, not for punitive reasons, but to figure out lessons learned of what we can learn from a given incident, and makes recommendations about how to improve the overall cyber ecosystem for the good of the community. It's this EO that creates the CSRB, and that's been up and running for about 2 years now. We have not yet applied it to a ransomware incident, but I think we've created a really good forum and a really good model of how to collaboratively work between the public sector and the private sector to look at incidents, right? And so I
Yeah.
could see a world where we apply that to ransomware in the future and figure out how to derive some recommendations that are more broadly applicable coming from that type of review.
It's funny. I think when you talk to someone as the Department of Homeland Security, they think of, all the, the movies and things of that nature, and all the, spies and things of that nature. But in fact, some of the biggest exposures we have are just our regular businesses, small, mid-sized businesses, all the way to our enterprise type of organizations that touch our critical infrastructure.
Yeah, when we fight a conflict, if we're going to have a conflict or a war with someone, we have a military, it's very clear that the soldiers and the pilots are the ones that have to fight the war and fight the conflict. In cyber, the fight is brought at home, and it's really your IT security folks, your service providers, your small and medium businesses that are kind of engaged in this day-to-day fighting with ransomware actors, right? The ransomware actors are probing for vulnerabilities on a daily, hourly basis on all of these vital services that we have. And they only have to be right once, but we have a series of cyber defenders and companies and corporations across this country that have to be vigilant 24/7, whether that's a nation state actor or a ransomware criminal sitting in Russia looking to make a quick dollar. Those are all coming at our small and medium businesses.
So in a way, you're like a field general out there trying to help the private sector and align the public sector, kind of get them marching in the same direction. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know if I'd call myself a field general or anything like that. More just, a policy nerd sitting at a government desk. But yeah,
Policy nerd.
I think the federal government is trying to set a strategic priority, a strategic imperative in this country for all stakeholders, including small and medium businesses, to really amp up their game, really step up their cyber defenses, offer resources, and really have people thinking that this is an issue, right? I think it's easy for a lot of people to say, I'm not going to be targeted, that they're not going to come after me. Who am I? But the reality is you are most likely a player. You are most likely an integral node in society, and people will know that that's a juicy victim for people, right? Like there's a reason why some of the most targeted victims we see these days are hospitals and schools, right? Because societies want those services, right? You're not going to want a hospital to go down. So, attackers know that people will pay to get out of those situations. And that's because of who you are.
It's part of your responsibility to look for ways to invest accordingly, maybe even financially and or through training the business sectors. Is that part of your role?
Yeah, most definitely. Where the department is constantly creating resources to help businesses look for,
Yeah.
new creative ways to engage.
Yeah.
Hopefully, this podcast alone helps reach a bigger and newer audience.
Yeah, but your view is on our nation, but you have a thought and an eye to the rest of the world in terms of how we are protecting ourselves against the rest of the world. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So if you had your own business right now, your small business, how would you engage with the government? How would you best? Is it engaging with your organization, the DHS, or is it with through CISA? What are your recommendations in terms of how a business owner could engage more and benefit from a relationship with the government?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a couple of ways I think you can more directly interact with the government. I think for cyber incidents, you really want to engage with your local representatives of the federal government before an attack so that if an attack happens, you know the phone numbers, you know the people to call, and those can take a couple of different forms. So for CISA, our cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency, we have a field presence. We have people, representatives, cybersecurity advisors that are placed throughout the country in the
Mm,
various regionals groupings that we have. And so you can contact your local CISA field representative
okay.
and get to know them. If you haven't or otherwise don't know your local FBI field office, that is another option. And we stay coordinated on the back end, right? You can ask FBI how to get in touch with CISA and vice versa.
Yeah.
But those are folks that are on the ground. They can come out and help work with you before you have an incident, or obviously FBI will help you with the investigation if an incident does happen. But there are field forces that exist that you should definitely get to know. And the CISA and FBI websites should have all that contact
Yeah.
information specific to your local region.
Yeah, and I've got a request into the FBI to for a 3 podcast series. One of those being how do you engage and when do you engage? The your local offices, because I think a lot of people are intimidated or just like they don't want to waste their time, the FBI's time that is a think oh I'm not that important, but in fact they really are.
Oh yeah, no, totally. I think the answer to your question is early. The earlier, the better. The more you know those
Yeah.
people, the easier it becomes. And I mean, as a Fed, I'll be the first to say, like, we want to be engaged. We want to, talk to you, even if it's not specific to an incident. I'm not gonna lie, as a junior FBI guy, the amount of PowerPoint decks I was making for cyber guys in the field to go, run out and do
Yeah.
cyber presentations to local businesses was
Yeah.
constant, right? They
Yeah.
have materials and presentations, and they can come talk to you about what the threat profile looks like in your sector. CISA maintains databases of known exploited vulnerabilities, right? And so
Yeah.
that's available on our website. You can download that, and
Hmm.
they offer, CISA offers free cyber hygiene scanning services where you can allow them to scan your systems and show you where the open vulnerabilities may be. And
Yeah.
that's a free service that we provide because we want you all to identify those risks.
Yeah, and we've had Daniel Elliott on talking about the small business guy because he's the small mid-sized business lead for NIST, and
Nice.
that was really well received. And just like this is going to be a fantastic, informative session. So, do you have any final thoughts before I ask you my final question?
No, I think just remain, I would say for small and medium businesses, find ways to engage us. We're going to try to find ways to engage you, but you guys are the lifeblood of our economy, and we really
Yeah,
need you to have secure cyber defenses in order to continue providing essential services to Americans. And you may be a linchpin in a broader supply chain that could have really detrimental impacts. And so, you're really important, and we really value you engaging with us to make sure that you're in a good position to defend yourselves.
if you could do one thing today, Iranga, you're listening to this podcast and saying, "Oh, Iranga says do this today," what would that be?
Double down on the basics. I think
Hmm.
for a lot of folks, cybersecurity and defense can be or feel intimidating It could feel complicated. You could maybe not be the most well-resourced or the most technical. And so
Yeah.
it's scary. It feels like
Yeah.
a lot. And, I think we have had a lot of evidence that some really basic steps you can take mitigate a large majority, 70, 80, 90 plus percent of threats.
Yeah.
And some of those are very basic. Use multi-factor authentication, right? So don't just rely on a password, have a second form of verifying it. When we're talking about passwords, change them regularly and make them complicated, right? If you
Yeah.
think you can handle using a password manager, there are these programs out there that organize passwords and create unique ones for you that are sufficiently complex and saves them all in a secure system, and you just have to remember your master password.
Yeah.
That's a great one. Make sure you use encryption and encryption methodologies.
Mm.
Those are usually default on a lot of these systems. And make sure you're staying up to date on patches and updates, right? Like a lot of times I know a lot of us get that
Yeah.
little red circle or that number one in the corner saying update, update, and you push it off because you don't want to restart your computer or you don't have
Yep.
time. But update those. Those are providing patches and defenses for things that we know are being exploited. So some of these like really basic ones, you don't have to do, I mean, you should do some more complicated ones, but
Yeah.
if you don't have the time, if you don't have the resources, there's some very simple steps that you can take as an individual. And then as an organization, it might get a little more complicated, but we've done a lot of the homework for you.
Yeah.
DHS has put out something called the Cyber Performance Goals, which are a set of controls that you can give to your IT managers in a prioritized way to help you buy down risk. We've tried to list that in a prioritized way. If you're resource constrained, do these. If you get a little more resources, do these next couple of controls. But we've tried to make it as easy as possible. So I encourage your listeners, if they feel intimidated, to just research a little more, and I think they'll quickly realize it's not as complicated as it could be.
Yeah, and we'll facilitate some of those connections on our website too, our portal. I tell you, Iranga, it's a real pleasure to get a chance to chat with you about this, and you're going to help a lot of people, and I really appreciate it. And everyone at the SafeHouse Initiative do appreciate everything that you're doing. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for everything you are doing, and I appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts. Hope everyone has a good rest of your day. Thank you very much for having me.
That's our podcast for today. I'm Jeff Edwards for the SafeHouse Initiative. Thanks for joining us, and remember, be safe, be resilient, and be kind to each other. For more information about the SafeHouse Initiative, please use your mobile device to scan the QR code on the screen, or send us an email at info@safehouseinitiative.org, or visit us on our website, safehouseinitiative.org. We look forward to hearing from you.